All right, so say your name and occupation.
My name is Steve Robson. I am a music therapist, and currently I teach a special education class called A Positive Approach to Student Success.
Okay, and so elaborate on how you started in music therapy.
Well, when I was in high school, I've been from a very musical family. I've always been involved in music, singing and playing. And when I was in high school, I took psychology, and I got really interested in it. And I actually took a social psychology class where I had to do a research project, and I went to I got permission to go to a local elementary school and help teach in a special education classroom. And I got really excited about that and really into it, and just realized how difficult it was. And I kind of instinctively used music trying to teach this one particular young man. And then I met a woman who was staying with a friend of mine, and she introduced me to music therapy. She was a music therapy professor at the University of Minnesota at the time. And she told me about music therapy, and I thought, wow, a perfect way to blend my new interest in psychology with my lifelong interest in music. When I graduated from high school, she moved from the University of Minnesota, and my plan was to go to the University of Minnesota. And she came to Texas, and after my freshman year, so I was kind of in limbo my freshman year, I went to Iowa Central Community College, trying to figure out what I was going to do now. She started a program at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, and gave me a call and said, Steve, why don't you come to Texas? I can get you a scholarship. And so I came to Texas. I graduated from Sam Houston State University with a bachelor's degree in music therapy. And for 26 years, I've been working with people with disabilities and special needs. And about 18, 19 years ago, I went back to graduate school and got a degree in education, special education, and I have used music therapy in special education classrooms for about the last 18 years.
Okay, so talk about what music therapy is and how it works.
Well, music therapy is using music to accomplish extra musical goals. Using music to accomplish goals in therapy or goals in education that aren't music goals. They're just goals that a patient, client, student needs to accomplish, and you use music to help them get there. Music, the theory behind music in education and in therapy comes from thousands of years of experience with music. Music, now that we can map it in our brains, activates many different areas of our brains. And so a lot of research has been done about why is it that people who have Alzheimer's disease and can't remember what just happened can remember every song they knew as a child, and it changes their personality back to their former life when they're thinking about those songs and these music associations. So music is very connected to memory because it activates in so many areas of the brain. So music's usefulness in all of these different areas makes it important in therapy and across many different therapies, whether it be speech therapy. One area that I studied in college was melodic intonation therapy, which is used to teach those stroke patients how to speak again. Right here in the Houston area, the Institute for Rehabilitation and Research, music therapy kind of got a real big boost in popularity several years ago when a senator who had been shot in the head came to TIER and received music therapy, and they did several news articles and television shows on Gabby Giffords and how she was using music therapy for her rehabilitation here in Houston at TIER. I've used it working in a nursing home, working in the Richmond State School with people with severe physical disabilities to help them. Some of my students or clients had cerebral palsy, spastic cerebral palsy, and it helped them to calm down to where they were exhausted, and we would use it to help them with the rhythm of walking. Also, I worked at the Richmond State School with people who had autism, and they had very amazing musical abilities. Some of them had never ever been taught music or a musical instrument, but could play every hymn they ever heard in church perfectly on the piano. When I was working at the Richmond State School, I had a young lady who had a lot of anxiety, had autism. She's a grown woman, and she could get very physically aggressive and destructive. And she destroyed the room that I was in more than once. So I was determined to help her through this. She came to music therapy very upset one day, and I had learned this principle that I call the ISO principle, which is start where you are. And I just started playing the piano to match where she was. She was very upset, and I matched her mood playing in a minor key very loudly. She began to interact with me in her vocalizations. And then I slowed down a little bit, and she began to slow down. And then I started playing in a major key, and she began to calm down. And then I began to play very melodically and arpeggios. And long story short, without me saying a word, the music took her from an enraged state to a calm state, and we were able to accomplish her goals for the day without me saying a word, with only using music. And so I was totally sold on the power of music in therapy from then, and have used it in lots of different environments since then.
So explain how you transitioned from working in the hospital with patients to using it in your teaching of the special ed students.
Well, it is very different, but it's the same principles. Music is very powerful in the brain because it activates so many areas of the brain and is so connected to memory. So in a hospital setting, when I worked at the psychiatric hospital, I was using it to help people to reorganize. Most of my patients were psychotic, but they weren't acting on that psychosis when they were in music therapy. It really helped them to organize their thoughts instead of focusing on their psychosis. In the same way, in the educational setting, it helps my students organize their thoughts, and being so connected to memory, it's a mnemonic device. In other words, it helps them to memorize certain things in education, whether it be the steps to an algebraic equation or long division, to my students who have severe behavior difficulties, helping them to express their emotions without words. Many people, grown or male or adolescent or child, don't have the words to describe what it is they're going through. It's too painful, they don't understand it for whatever reason. They can't connect words to it, but they can connect music to it, and they can express it in that way. So I teach my students to express it in that way. It's a positive way for them to express themselves, but it also helps them to remember the things I want them to remember about how to go from where they are to where they need to be.